So, another decade has come and gone and I'm still making YouTube videos. It's funny because I feel like in my life, my decades don't exactly coincide with when real decades begin and end. This era, for instance, felt like it began in 2006 when I joined YouTube. Especially in gaming, so much of me discovering new games, enjoying them with other people, and engaging with games intellectually in the last 10 years has been through watching and making content on YouTube. So to me, this decade in gaming really began when that part of my world opened up. And it probably ended in 2016 when I hit my 10-year mark and went back to school, and the role of games in my life changed really drastically. So 2020 feels like the fourth year of a new decade, and unfortunately so far it's been a pretty busy one for me. I only graduated from college just a few weeks ago, and I've become, as the kids say, kind of a normie. So as the years have evolved, so has my lifestyle and my gaming habits. It's interesting how the games I played each year sort of tell the story of where my life was at that point. So today I thought I'd share with you my favorite games of each year for the past decade. Not the Tama decade, but the real one, the 2010 to 2019 decade. This list isn't going to be objective or based on any kind of strict criteria. It's not based on review scores or sales figures. It's just going to be whichever game is aligned with my personal taste and playing habits of each year. So let's get into it and send off the last 10 years with a bang! Or a countdown. I don't know where I'm going with this. Let's just start the video. My games of the year for 2010 are HeartGold and SoulSilver or Fallout New Vegas. Picking a favorite game this year is like picking a favorite kidney. So many of my all-time favorite games came out right in 2010. So buckle up because I have a lot to say. Starting off, HeartGold and SoulSilver are some of the best Pokemon games ever made, still to this day. I'll talk about them more when I get around to doing a full review, but my expectations for them were really low when I first heard that they were coming out, to the point that I just buried my head in the sand and avoided all the promotional material for them. Diamond and Pearl, as you well know by now, were pretty low points in the franchise for me, and I didn't play Platinum at all until years later. I was not about to get my hopes up for another mediocre remake. So imagine how swept off my feet I was when I played HeartGold for the first time, saw my Pokemon walking by my side, and was fully immersed in Johto once again. Not only is it the only good remake in the series, it goes above and beyond to justify its existence as a Pokemon game in its own right. It's one of the few Pokemon games I consider to be basically a masterpiece. HeartGold and SoulSilver would easily take the title if it weren't for Fallout New Vegas coming out the same year. This was the game that taught me that all the things I love about playing games are in fact because of the role-playing aspects, not in spite of them. Being able to build a character, give them strengths and weaknesses, deciding how that character would make decisions influenced by both their proficiencies and flaws, and seeing those decisions impact the world and the story in real time is an extremely satisfying form of creative expression. You get to tell the story of the courier, whoever they might be. Few games attempt the level of nuance found in each of these quest lines, and I can't tell you how much I miss good quest design and a strong character creation system with pros and cons to perks in Fallout games these days. And perks that don't solely influence combat. The only downside, of course, is that this game was made in an extremely rushed time frame, and as a result, many important aspects of the game are broken or glitchy. The graphics are also so bad that it becomes physically painful for me to play, as they trigger migraine headaches. But New Vegas, to date, is the only game I will willingly subject myself to a raging headache for. This will never happen because Bethesda has no integrity, but New Vegas is one of the few games I think actually desperately needs a remaster, just so I can play it without torturing myself. 2010 was just overall an extremely solid year for RPGs, and probably the year that made me fall irreversibly in love with the genre. My games of the year for 2011 are LittleBigPlanet 2 or The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. LittleBigPlanet 2, and the first one that came out in 2008, are incredibly underrated games. Like, don't get me wrong, they were massively popular, but I think if they came out later in the decade when gaming was just bigger with the kind of audience that would have really appreciated it, the series would be as beloved to the masses as it is to me. Just a creative, beautiful little side-scroller that is limitlessly big when you dive into level creation and the massive library of user-created levels out there. As an adult, few things simulate the uninhibited pure fun of playing with your favorite toys as a kid. The homemade feeling levels, the doll-like physics of the sack thing, and the atmosphere of pure imagination makes LittleBigPlanet the only outlet for that exact feeling I've ever found in a game. I suppose in a way, LittleBigPlanet is like the best Rugrats game ever made. At the time, I knew I had to cherish the experience because so much of it depended on online play and that the community for it wouldn't always be there. At least I think at the end of the decade the levels are all still online, but the curation of user levels by the devs ended when the franchise changed hands. So LittleBigPlanet might firmly be a relic of the past at this point, but it's one I'm glad I got to share in its heyday. As for Skyrim, what do I even say? When Skyrim came out, I hadn't actually played New Vegas yet. I waited a few years after its actual release year to play it, so perhaps my appreciation for deep RPG gameplay hadn't developed yet. As my first taste of that limitless exploration and the kind of real-feeling world Skyrim provided, it was pretty addictive, and has consumed maybe thousands of hours of my life in the past 9 years. I still want to play it every winter. It's the kind of game that maybe isn't perfect, but's wrong in all the right ways to be enjoyable, and ultimately becomes endeared to you after you live in it long enough. Like the internet, it's definitely flawed, but it feels like home to me. And my game of the year for 2012 is Pokemon Black 2 and White 2. To be fair, you have to have a very high IQ to understand Black and White. The commentary is extremely subtle, and without a solid grasp of theoretical ethics, most of the text will go over a typical player's head. There's also N's transcendentalist outlook, which is deftly woven into his characterization. His personal philosophy draws heavily from Peter Singer literature, for instance. The fans will understand this stuff. They have the intellectual capacity to truly appreciate the depths of these takes, to realize that they're not just villains, they say something deep about life. As a consequence, people who dislike Black and White truly are idiots. Of course they wouldn't appreciate, for instance, the humor in Heartbreaker Charles's existential catchphrase, "I'm a heartbreaker, my name, Charles," which itself is a cryptic reference to Simple Plan's epic Addicted to You. I'm smirking right now just imagining one of those addle-pated simpletons scratching their heads in confusion as Junichi Masuda's genius wit unfolds itself on their DS screens. What fools. How I pity them. And yes, by the way, I do have a Skyla tattoo. And no, you cannot see it. It's for the ladies' eyes only, and even then they have to demonstrate that they're within 5 IQ points of my own, preferably lower, beforehand. Nothing personnel, kid. Sorry for the copy pasta. The real hot takes I have to say for the review. And my game of the year for 2013 is Animal Crossing New Leaf. New Leaf was not my first foray into Animal Crossing, and it's still not my favorite. That honor belongs to Wild World, and always will. Let's just say Wild World and New Leaf are like different flavors of the same experience, and Wild World is just spicier. The villagers had stronger, more distinct, and vibrant personalities, and there's more of a focus on building relationships with them, and the other animals that lived in your town. You had to put in work to maintain your town, and it really fell apart if you weren't there. You could lose progress, so you became more invested in the town and its development. Nook's backstory, Sable's trust, these were all secrets you could earn if you put enough time into getting to know everyone. Wild World had a lot of depth for a game that came out on the DS in 2005. New Leaf is blander, milder. The villagers' personalities all blend together. They don't get upset with you if you let them down or bother them too much. There are no consequences for absence if you don't want there to be. You can turn off weed growth with a town ordinance. The secret backstories of characters like Sable are now mandatory parts of the story that you need to tediously dredge through in order to get to the real draw, customization. There's nothing to get invested in, no depth, just a canvas to paint on. So it's a cake with a blander taste but prettier decoration. Now, I realize this all sounds extremely harsh, and I was at first very bummed on New Leaf. It traded in my favorite things, smoothed out any rough edges for a game that lacked personality and appealed to as many people as possible. But I can also say that as I've gotten older, I've learned to appreciate aesthetics more than I did as a youngster. There is fun in just setting out to put together the prettiest town, design the cutest clothes, swapping patterns with pals and strangers online through QR codes. The villagers, rather than main characters you form meaningful relationships with, are just another dressing you can add. It's all very expressing in a nice, relaxing way. You can set your own goals and figure out day by day how to make them a reality. It's kind of like knitting a scarf or a paint-by-numbers puzzle. It takes less investment, but it's still relaxing to plant a bush here, grow some flowers there, lay down some paths, pay off a public works project, and you feel proud of the end result. It's a rewarding experience in its own way, even if it's not the same game I fell in love with. And maybe it's more what I'm looking for now as an adult with relationships that exist outside of video games. New Leaf is a game I guess you could say I grew into as the decade wore on. My game of the year for 2014 is Mario Kart 8. This was not a very strong year for games for me. In my personal life, I was going through a number of changes. In 2013, I moved to Portland and felt more isolated than ever because of how overwhelming it was to adjust to living in a new city, not knowing anyone or anything or even how to get around. That's why at the time, I needed a game like Animal Crossing New Leaf to be more to me than it was. But in 2014, I was settling into a routine, and mostly one that involved working non-stop. I was going to class every day of the week, and pumping out YouTube videos weekly as well. This busy schedule meant playing for fun kind of fell by the wayside, which is why it's strange to call a game like Mario Kart 8 my game of the year. I don't really have any passion for Mario Kart, it's just fun to play now and then. But it's the only game that came out in 2014 that I still play at all or have any affection for. It didn't really have any ongoing significance in my life until really recently either. In late 2017, years and years later when it was re-released on the Switch, I made friends with some of my new coworkers by playing a sloppy, drunk Mario Kart 8 tournament and nearly winning. So most of my memories of this game are pretty great ones in spite of not really caring that much about the game itself. I guess more than anything, Mario Kart 8's a game that's emblematic of a shift in my relationship with games. It used to be a very closed and intense system for me, and these days it's more of an open, light one. My game of the year for 2015 is Undertale. Not gonna lie, 2015 is a contender for one of the worst years of my life. At the end of 2014, I underwent something really traumatic, so I spent most of the following year trying to cope and recover from it, as well as run away from it by consuming myself with even more work and dropping out of school. This year, my memory is just a miserable blur. Undertale ended up being one of the few bright spots in what was a pretty dark time for me. It was comforting in that it was familiar, it had a classic low-res RPG feeling, and lovable, adorable characters, but it also challenged me in some interesting ways. I guess you could say I was kind of struggling to figure out where games and the internet fit into my life anymore, now that the other shoe had dropped and it wasn't making me happy. And having a game that felt like it was almost explicitly a commentary about those things sort of made me uncomfortable and pushed my boundaries. After all, Undertale will comment on your playing habits. It will remember if you start a new save file. It will remember what routes you attempt in which order. It will comment on your previous choices and make you examine them. It will fake you out and make you think that something is wrong at times. It breaks the contract or boundary between you and the game, in that you expect to be playing it alone without judgment or an audience. It has this kind of creepy quality in that way. It feels like it's watching you. It feels like it's invading your privacy, much like being in the public eye online ended up doing for me at that time, and it kind of poked some of those fresh wounds for me. But I have to admire that a game was able to do that at all. Undertale is a game with something to say about games, made by a bottom-dweller ROM hacker, industry scum like me. At this point in time, it felt revolutionary that a game made by like 2 people could make me feel anything that real. Honestly, just bless Toby Fox for his come-up and for making such a perfectly executed, homemade-feeling RPG, with a lot more going on than you'd ever expect. Undertale's one I probably won't replay anytime soon, because I don't need to lick that sword to know that it still hurts. But I won't ever forget it, and how it pushed me out of my comfort zone in a time where I was kinda clinging to it. My game of the year for 2016 is Pokemon Go! The months following Pokemon Go's release were like finally coming up for air after drowning for a long time. I didn't know how to make games and content work for me anymore post-trauma. So here was a game that told me to get off the computer and go outside into the sun and fresh air and just play a game for me again. And it was a turning point in my recovery. I left the house, I saw old friends, I went and played with old friends. It was a dream come true. Not only was I sharing Pokemon, the love of my life, with people who had never experienced it before, I was having fun again. Suddenly Pokemon felt real and it was everywhere. We used to do community days at this one forest park and nearly 100 people would turn out. Young, old, fan, newcomer, it didn't matter. Everyone was out catching Pokemon. I think my favorite part of the game when it first came out was the steps counter, which sadly no longer functions this way. Back then it used to be a kind of hot-cold counter for whether or not you were getting closer or further from a Pokemon on your radar, so it felt like you were really about to corner that Jigglypuff at a Best Buy. The hunt felt much more real, and it was so exciting finally catching up to and catching whatever rare Pokemon you were chasing. I have a memory of my friend and I tracking a Pokemon, and then our games both crashing when we went to catch it. We literally screamed out loud. But when we reopened our games, we were so happy because the Pokemon was there in our inventory. I'll never forget screaming in a public place being a totally normal thing because of this game. And it was nice not feeling alone in the dark anymore. Granted, Pokemon Go is not solely to thank for my recovery. I started going to therapy and made a number of other changes in my life that year too, but it gave me a way to de-stress when I needed one that didn't involve my old outlets, and helped me form new habits around gaming, and that was valuable to me. And my games of the year for 2017 are Everybody's Golf or Jackbox Party Pack 4. This was the year I went back to school and got a part-time job, so my gaming dropped off a lot. I figured out what I really wanted in life was stability, which meant that I had to leave my life of playing video games for a living full-time behind. So this is where my relationship with games really started transitioning from that intense closed system to more of an open and casual one. I didn't play very much because I was spending a lot of my energy and free time trying to get the most out of suddenly being connected to civilization again. But I'm a huge sucker for golf games. I don't play real golf, and every golf game is essentially the exact same thing, but put any golf game in front of me, no matter how many other ones I've played, and I will play the shit out of it. Pangia, my longtime golf video game love, sadly died in 2016. So it was nice to pick up Everybody's Golf and relive some of those satisfying thwacks and soaring birdies, with a fairly close approximation of a cute anime character as my avatar. Another contender for the title this year is Jackbox Party Pack 4, over which I bonded with my newly formed IRL friend group throughout the course of the year. Some of my happiest memories are just sitting in my friend's apartment in the dark, drinking cider and playing Faking It until 12 a.m. every week. We each contributed $11 in order to buy the complete Jackbox collection and then spent the rest of the year playing it until we were finally sick of it. My games of the year for 2018 are the Spyro Reignited Trilogy, or Katamari Damacy Reroll. Man, 2018 really was the year of remakes and ports, huh? Sad to say, this cheap marketing strategy worked on me, and basically all I played for the year were ports of my old favorites. Got nearly all the girls in Virgo this time in Damacy. Only one escaped. Reignited was slightly disappointing because they spent the least time polishing Year of the Dragon, which is my favorite of the trilogy, so I started with that one first and encountered several frustrating glitches immediately. I don't think I even finished it. Weird to still call it my game of the year, but my pickings were slim since I was still so busy with school and work and my social life that I barely played anything. And my game of the year for 2019 is The Outer Worlds. The decade started strong with RPGs and it finished strong with Outer Worlds. Although I do play games kind of more casually now, it's mostly just in the way I prefer to play newer games. I can never shake my deep affection for a great, satisfying RPG, and I will always make time in my life for that. Now that the pressure of content being my livelihood is behind me, and my life is in a stable, more healthy place, I can sincerely enjoy a game like this again, and just in time for the gang at Obsidian to pull one out. I had lost hope after Fallout 4 of anything ever coming close to New Vegas ever again. But Obsidian came roaring back, and we got an honest-to-God Fallout again, in the form of something else entirely. How refreshing it is to have real quests, to make character decisions, to explore an interesting and dynamic galaxy full of many real-feeling worlds and people. I haven't finished it yet since I just got it at the end of the year, but I'm so stoked to play more. I went into it pretty blind, so I'll probably get a lot out of continuing to play it and replay it for many years to come, rolling new characters and trying new playstyles. A great game to take with me into the new decade. Well, that was a wild ride, huh? You got a 2-in-1, a video about games and also my autobiography over the last 10 years. I hope that also explains where I've been and why I upload less these days. Much like a good RPG, YouTube will always have a place in my life, but in order for that place to be a happy, healthy one, it can't be the intense closed system it used to be. I done grown too much to fit in that box anymore, but I'll always make time to whip up some content when the mood is right. Maybe it'll be meatier, more filling content than the weekly stuff I used to pop out. Don't worry, I'll keep you fed one way or another. And if Outer Worlds is any indication, I won't stop playing video games anytime soon either. Let me know what your favorite games of the decade were in the comments below. I'm interested to know how y'all have grown over the last 10 years too. Thanks for sticking with me, and here's to another great 10 years of games.